The service elevator smelled like disinfectant and something fried that had gone cold. I stood a little to the side, back straight, hands relaxed at my waist, letting 2 banquet carts roll past me. A server in a crisp white shirt balanced a tray of flute glasses like it was second nature. Someone else squeezed in with an arrangement of pale flowers that brushed my shoulder. No one looked twice at me. That was the point. A young man with a name tag that read Evan glanced down at the folder in my hand and then at my shoes, like he was trying to decide if I was lost or just early. "First time up to the rooftop suite?" he asked, voice kind, the way people sound when they've already decided to help you. "Something like that," I said. I adjusted the small diamond studs in my ears. They weren't flashy. They were old. The kind you wear because they remind you of a day you don't talk about. The day we closed the acquisition of Redwood Crest Hospitality. This resort was one of the first assets in the deal. Evan leaned in a little as the elevator jolted and climbed. "Hallways can be rough," he whispered, "especially tonight. Especially her." I didn't ask who he meant. I already knew. "My future daughter-in-law," I said lightly, as if I was commenting on the weather. Evan's eyes widened for half a second. Then he gave a quick, polite smile, the one staff learn early. "Right," he said, and cleared his throat. "Well, congratulations." The elevator chimed. The doors slid open. Bright light spilled in from the rooftop corridor. The carpet here was thick enough to swallow footsteps. The air was cool and heavily scented, like someone had sprayed money into it. Evan pushed one of the doors with his shoulder and nodded toward the suite entrance. "They're setting up in there," he said. "If you need the staging area, it's—" "I'm fine," I told him. I paused at the threshold for a beat, not because I was nervous, but because I could hear the room before I could see it. Voices, quick steps, the soft tear of tape, a glass clinking against another glass, then a sharper sound. No, absolutely not. The voice was young, controlled, and irritated in that polished way some people have when they're used to being obeyed. "The linens are blush, not rose," she continued, "and those napkin folds look cheap. Cheap." I stepped inside. The suite looked out over the valley, all glass and stone and twilight. Staff moved in tight patterns, adjusting, fixing, carrying, nodding. A planner stood near the center, holding a clipboard like a shield. And in the middle of it all was the bride-to-be. She wore a pale blue dress that fit like it had been poured on. A dress that cost more than my first car, and probably more than the apartment I lived in when I was working 2 jobs and taking night classes. I didn't stare. I didn't need to. I walked a few steps in and stopped where I wouldn't be in anyone's way. "Is there an issue?" I asked gently. She turned fast, hair swinging, eyes flicking over me. She took in the navy dress, the folder, the calm posture. Then her gaze hit my face. "Who are you?" she asked. I held her eyes. "I'm Lena Marquez," I said. "Caleb's mother." Recognition didn't soften her. It changed shape, like a door shutting quietly. "Oh," she said. "Right." She gave a small smile that didn't reach anywhere real. "He told me you might arrive early to assist," she said. And then her eyes dipped again, scanning me as if she was trying to place me in a category that made sense to her. "Staff should have directed you to staging. I guess they did okay." I felt the words land. I let them sit. I didn't correct her. I didn't react. I only nodded once, polite, almost absent-minded, like I was listening to a weather report. "I assumed I'd be near the welcome line with my son," I said, as if I was thinking out loud. She blinked, just slightly, like that possibility hadn't occurred to her. Before she could reply, another woman swept into the suite. You could feel her before you saw her. Perfume, jewelry, confidence that didn't require permission. She moved with the energy of someone who had never carried her own bags. "Sweetheart," she said to the bride-to-be, and kissed the air near her cheek. "Guests are arriving. Where is everyone?" Then her eyes found me. A pause. A smile that looked practiced. "Oh," she said, voice lifting. You must be Caleb's mother. The pause between must and mother was small, but it was precise, like a needle. 15 years ago, it would have made me shrink. Tonight, it only made me take note. Yes, I said. Lena. She didn't offer her first name. Mrs. Holloway, I added politely, because I'd seen her before. Not in person, on programs, in photos, on the kind of foundation boards that liked their names printed in tall letters. Her hand fluttered in a dismissive little wave. Stunning venue, I said, looking around. The redesign really honors the building. Whoever handled the restoration did it carefully. Her smile tightened. You must thank our architects, she said. The new ownership spared no expense, though I preferred the last group. They understood standards. I kept my expression neutral. I remembered the last group, the way they'd sat across from me in a conference room in San Jose and tried to sound confident while their hands shook over their coffee cups. They hadn't recognized me either. Not at first. They had assumed I was the consultant. People assume a lot when you're quiet. The bride-to-be stepped closer to her mother, voice lower. Mom, she said, glancing at me. We should go over the seating plan, given the circumstances. Of course, love, her mother said. Then she turned back to me with that same sweet smile. Mrs. Marquez, she said, we arranged a charming spot for you in the private dining room. It's more comfortable, more informal. I finished the thought silently, away from the main room, away from photos, away from the people who mattered. I glanced down at my watch, understated, clean, expensive in the way only certain things are expensive, the kind of watch that doesn't sparkle, it simply exists. How considerate, I said. The suite door opened again, and the temperature in the room shifted. A familiar voice cut through the noise. Mom. Caleb stood in the doorway, tailored suit, calm face, eyes scanning the room in one quick sweep. He looked at me, then at them, then back at me. He already understood. The bride-to-be rushed toward him and looped her arm through his like she'd practiced it. Caleb, she said brightly, too bright. I was just helping your mother find her seat, in the staff area, so she won't feel overwhelmed. Caleb's expression cooled, not angry, just colder. We talked about this, he said quietly. I met his eyes and gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. He knew that look. He'd seen it in meetings, in negotiations, in rooms where people walked in confident and left with nothing. It's fine, I said softly. I'm comfortable. Her mother laughed once, short and careless. Well, she said, given your background, we assumed you'd prefer something simple. For a moment, the room went still in a way only wealthy rooms do, when something rude has been said out loud, and everyone is pretending it wasn't. Caleb took a small step forward. I placed my hand lightly on his forearm, just enough to stop him. Then I did what I always do when things begin to tilt. I made a decision in silence. Let's focus on welcoming the guests, I said. They're arriving. Right on cue, the elevator chimed again out in the hall. Voices grew louder. Laughter. The soft rush of people entering a space that belonged to them, even when it didn't. Caleb leaned in close so only I could hear him. You don't have to take this, he murmured. Say the word and I'll end the surprise. I straightened his tie the way I used to when he was younger and still let me. Why spoil the evening? I said. A flicker of a smile tugged at his mouth, then disappeared as he turned toward the doorway, stepping into his role. I stayed where I was for one more beat, listening to the room fill. Then I walked toward the edge of the suite, champagne already being offered, my folder still in my hand, and I let them keep believing their version of me. For now. Because in my folder wasn't a speech or a plan to make a scene. It was paperwork, and one printed email with a timestamp that didn't match their story at all. I slipped it back under the cover and waited. I moved to the side of the suite, close enough to see what was happening, far enough that no one could claim I was in the way. That is a skill you learn early. How to be present without being invited. How to listen without offering yourself up as a target. The room kept filling. People arrived in small waves, greeting each other like they had been waiting all week to be witnessed. Soft laughter, perfume, the quiet tapping of heels on stone. A woman in pearls leaned over a display of champagne flutes and asked the planner if the label on the sparkling water was appropriate. A man with a red face and a loud voice made a joke about the valet line and waited for it to land. The staff moved like they were underwater, controlled, practiced, careful. I watched them, and my mind did what it always does when I walk into a building I own. I started noticing systems. A bartender's station set too close to the terrace doors, which meant a traffic jam later. A service door propped open with a folded linen, which meant someone was trying to keep up with demand without permission. A stack of menus printed on thin stock, which meant the printer had been told to cut costs somewhere. I didn't judge it. I just logged it. Claire, the server from the elevator, passed by with a tray. She recognized me and gave a quick, polite nod. No curiosity this time, just professional courtesy. She looked like someone who had learned to read rooms fast. Caleb was already in motion. He shook hands, smiled, tilted his head at the right moments. When he was younger, he used to watch me do the same thing at events and ask how I stayed calm. I never had a clever answer for him. The truth was simple. I stayed calm because I had to. I grew up in a small apartment where quiet meant you were safe. Quiet meant you were paying attention. Quiet meant you were still in control of yourself even if someone else thought they were in control of you. Caleb's fiancée, Sloane, drifted through the crowd like she was hosting an awards show. She touched shoulders, laughed softly, posed her face toward whoever was holding a phone. Every few minutes she glanced toward the kitchen corridor, like she was checking whether I had stayed where she placed me. Her mother, Marin, did the same thing in a different way. Marin was the kind of woman who smiled at you while moving you out of the frame. She hovered near Sloane, correcting small details with a whisper, angling guests like props. And her father, Grant, held court near the terrace with two men who looked like they'd once been important and could not accept that time had moved on. I listened to him for less than a minute before I heard the pattern. He was telling stories about our properties, our partners, our club, and he spoke in a tone that assumed the room would always agree with him. Some people confuse volume with authority. It works until it doesn't. I let the noise settle around me. Then I did what I had promised myself I would do tonight. I waited. My folder was still tucked under my arm. Plain, no logo, no flair. Inside were documents I did not want to carry openly through the crowd. Not because they were secret, but because they were powerful in a quiet way. There was the final signature page from the purchase agreement. There was the updated cap table. There was the operational memo for the new general manager, including the directive about staff treatment, overtime audits, and vendor payment schedules. And there was one printed email with a timestamp that mattered. A thread from 3 months ago, when Marin had sent a friendly note to the previous ownership group, requesting continued courtesy access to certain amenities. The reply was polite, but firm. Access would change under new ownership. Marin had written back one sentence. We will see. I had highlighted it. Not out of anger, out of clarity. It told me what kind of woman she was when she believed she had leverage. A small movement near the entry caught my attention. Sloane was pulling Caleb toward the far side of the room, near a tall arrangement of flowers that blocked them from most eyes. Her hand was tight on his arm. Her voice was low. Her smile stayed on. I couldn't hear the words, but I knew the posture. It was the posture of someone trying to manage the story. Caleb's face shifted once, just once, like he was swallowing something he didn't want to swallow. Then his eyes lifted and found mine across the room. He held my gaze for a beat. I gave him a calm nod. Not yet. He exhaled through his nose, barely visible, and turned back to her. I took a slow sip of champagne, not because I needed it, but because it gave my hands something to do. Claire appeared again, this time closer. "Ma'am," she said softly, "are you okay over here? Do you need anything?" I looked at her name tag again. Claire. Same careful eyes, same steady hands. "I'm fine," I said. "Thank you for checking." She hesitated, then leaned in a fraction. "I don't mean to be forward," she said, "but people are saying you're family, and then they're saying you're not. I don't know what's true." I kept my voice gentle, almost boring. "People say a lot," I said. "What matters is how you're treated while they're talking." Her mouth pressed into a line. She nodded, like that landed somewhere familiar. Then she lowered her voice. "They made Marta cry earlier," she said. "The florist, Sloane did. Twice." I felt something in my chest, not heat, not rage, just a clear, hard note. "Where is Marta now?" I asked. "In the service hall," Claire said. "Behind the pantry. She's finishing the arch." I nodded once, logged it. Another system, another point of failure. "Thank you," I said. Claire started to step away, then paused. "Also," she added, even quieter, "the general manager has been looking for you. He's in the hallway by the private dining room." I looked toward the corridor, the same corridor they had suggested I use, as if it were a favor. "All right," I said. "I'll handle it." Claire's eyes widened slightly at the word handle, then she caught herself and nodded again. I set my champagne on a passing tray without asking permission. I held the folder close, not hidden, just secure. Then I walked out of the suite and into the corridor. The sound shifted immediately. The party noise dulled behind the door, replaced by softer footsteps and the faint hum of service vents. Halfway down the hall, a man in a dark suit straightened when he saw me. He looked like he hadn't slept well in weeks. "Ms. Marquez," he said, voice tight with relief. I recognized him from the transition meetings. New general manager. Careful, competent, a little overwhelmed. "Yes," I said. "What is it?" He glanced toward the suite door, then back to me. "There's something you should see," he said. "It came in 10 minutes ago. It's about the Holloways." I didn't change my expression. "Show me," I said. He opened a tablet, angled it toward me, and I read the subject line in silence. The subject line on the tablet was short, urgent, event deposit flagged. I read it once, then I read the sender. Finance, internal. The address ended in our domain, the one I'd insisted we standardize the week after the acquisition closed. It wasn't dramatic. It was a routine alert. That was what made it useful. The general manager, Keith, kept the tablet steady and watched my face like he expected a reaction. I didn't give him one. I scrolled with my thumb. The message was a thread between our accounts team and the event office. Timestamps, reference numbers. A simple note that the Holloway family's last deposit attempt had been declined, and the fallback payment method had triggered a fraud prevention hold. Below that, another attachment. A scanned vendor invoice from the florist, marked past due, not large enough to bankrupt anyone, but exactly the kind of bill that gets ignored when someone is living on reputation instead of cash. I looked up. "How long have you known?" I asked. Keith swallowed. "We didn't have full visibility until we migrated their profile into the new system. The event team kept it quiet because it's their biggest weekend. They were hoping it would resolve." "Hope isn't a process," I said. Quietly, not sharp, just factual. He nodded, almost grateful for the clarity. "There's more," he added, tapping another line. A second alert opened, this one from HR, incident report, vendor mistreatment. I clicked it and read the summary without changing my posture. Marta, the florist, had reported being spoken to in a way that crossed policy. She hadn't written anything dramatic, just a few sentences about being told she was replaceable, that she should be grateful, and that her work looked cheap. She'd signed the report with shaky handwriting on a digital pad. Under the report was the location and time, Service corridor, pantry door, 42 minutes ago. Keith cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Ms. Marquez. I should have intervened earlier. I heard raised voices, but I didn't realize it was directed at a vendor. It was directed at a person, I said. That's the part that matters. He nodded again. His shoulders dropped a fraction, like he'd been holding tension for hours. I handed the tablet back to him, gently. All right, I said. Step 1. Put a temporary hold on any additional charges tied to their profile until finance confirms cleared funds. Keith blinked. Even tonight? The bar upgrades, the extra staffing, Especially tonight, I said. A hold is not a cancellation. It's a pause until we see real payment. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, ma'am. Step 2, I continued. Pull every invoice tied to this event. Vendor contracts, deposits, change orders. I want a single packet, time-stamped, with who approved what. Keith's fingers moved fast as he took notes. Step 3, I said. Marta needs to be paid. Today. Not after the weekend, not after a conversation. Today. Keith looked relieved. I can authorize that. You can, I said, because I'm authorizing it. His eyes flicked up. I didn't say anything else yet. I didn't need to. We walked a few steps down the corridor toward the service pantry. The sounds of the party were muffled here, like the building itself was keeping a secret. A dishwasher hummed somewhere. A cart rattled over a threshold. Someone laughed in a staff break room, the laugh of a person grabbing 30 seconds of relief before going back out. Marta stood by a cluster of floral boxes, hands busy, face turned away like she didn't want anyone to see she'd been crying. She was focused on wire, stems, tape, work that keeps moving even when you don't. Keith stopped a respectful distance away. Marta, he said softly. She turned. Her eyes went straight to me, then away, then back, unsure. I'm sorry, she said quickly, as if she were the one in trouble. I'm fine. I'm finishing it. I just needed a minute. You're not in trouble, I said. She blinked. I read your report, I added calmly. Thank you for making it. You did the right thing. Her mouth tightened. She nodded. Small. I don't want problems, she said. I just want to do my job. I know, I said, and you should be able to. You will be paid today. If anyone speaks to you like that again, you come to Keith directly. If he's not available, you come to me. Keith's head turned slightly toward me, surprised at the simplicity of it. Marta's eyes widened, like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. Okay, she whispered. I kept my tone steady. Finish what you need to finish. Then go drink some water. Not later. Now, when you're done. She nodded again, this time a little firmer. We stepped away so she could breathe. Keith walked beside me, still holding his tablet like it weighed more than it should. Ms. Marquez, he said, voice careful. Do you want me to alert security? The Holloways can be reactive. Not yet, I said. Tonight is about keeping staff safe and keeping operations clean. If we need security, we'll use security. Quietly, with documentation. He nodded. Understood. We reached the corner where the corridor opened back toward the private dining room. A door stood slightly ajar. Inside was a small, elegant space with linen-covered tables and low light, set up for overflow and staff meals. The place they had offered me as a gentle suggestion. I stepped inside and set my folder on the nearest table. I opened it and slid the printed email thread out, placing it beside the tablet packet Keith had just pulled up again. 2 different kinds of proof. One about money. One about behavior. I looked at the timestamp on Marin's old email again, the one that ended with, "We will see." I touched the edge of the paper once, not as a gesture, just to keep it flat. Then I said, "Keith, bring me the full event file. I want it in my hands in 10 minutes. Yes, ma'am, he replied immediately, and left. I stayed alone in the quiet room, listening to the distant party sounds through the walls. Then I waited. Keith returned with a thick packet and a second tablet, both held close like they mattered. He set them on the table in front of me, then stood still, waiting for instructions the way good managers do when they finally recognize they are allowed to manage. I opened the packet first. Change orders, vendor lists, staffing add-ons, notes from the event planner written in a tone that sounded cheerful but read like panic when you knew what to look for. I didn't rush. I read the dates. I read the signatures. I tracked who approved what and when. I underlined nothing. I didn't need to. My mind does that part on its own. Keith cleared his throat. Finance is holding until we confirm cleared funds, like you asked. Good, I said. I turned to the second tablet. Keith had already pulled up the guest profile in our system. The Holloways had a long history here, the kind you can build when ownership stays the same for years, and everyone learns to be careful around you. Except ownership had changed, and the system had changed with it. I tapped into their account history. I read the notes left by previous managers, small warnings hidden inside polite language. Prefers discretion. VIP expectations. Handle personally. I let it sit there for a second. Then I clicked into the payment section again. The declined deposit, the fraud hold, the bounced attempt from last month that had been smoothed over by someone who didn't want to fight. Keith watched my face, trying to read it. I kept it calm. This is workable, I said. He blinked. It is? Yes, I said, but only if we stop improvising. I slid the packet into 3 neat piles. One, I said, tapping the first pile, is money, deposits, invoices, what's cleared and what hasn't. We do not extend additional credit tonight. Not $1. Keith nodded quickly. 2, I said, tapping the second pile, is conduct, staff and vendor treatment. We document every incident. We follow policy. No exceptions for dress, title, or guest list. His shoulders lowered like he'd been waiting to hear someone say that out loud. And 3, I said, tapping the last pile, is ceremony. We keep the party stable while we do the first 2. Guests do not need to know details yet. Staff does. Keith hesitated. Do you want me to brief the team? Yes, I said. Now. I pulled out my phone and typed a short message to our head of security. Not urgent, not dramatic. Just a directive to position 2 extra team members near service entrances and the terrace corridor, in plain clothes. No visible presence, just coverage. Then I sent a second message to our legal operations lead, asking them to stand by for a call later tonight. Again, no emotion, just timing. Keith waited, pen hovering over his notepad. I looked up at him. Here is the rule for the next hour, I said. If anyone asks who I am, you do not answer. You send them to me. Yes, he said. And if anyone raises their voice at staff, I added, you step in immediately. You do not apologize on behalf of the property. You simply say, we follow our conduct policy here. Then you document it. He swallowed and nodded. Understood. I stood and picked up my folder. The party noise was louder now, the hum of a room full of people who believed the night belonged to them. Keith moved toward the door, then stopped. Ms. Marquez, he said carefully. What about your son? He's out there. I don't want this to damage his engagement. I thought about that for a beat. Not long, just long enough to choose the cleanest truth. My son will be fine, I said. He grew up watching me solve problems in quiet rooms. This is just another quiet room. Keith nodded, and we stepped into the corridor together. As we walked back toward the suite, I could hear laughter cresting and falling, glasses clinking, someone calling for a toast rehearsal. We paused just outside the door. Keith reached for the handle. I stopped him with a small motion. Wait, I said. He froze. I glanced down at my watch again, not for style, but for timing. The next 15 minutes would decide whether this stayed contained or became public. I spoke in the same calm tone I use in meetings when a room starts to slip. Step 1 is confirmed funds, I said quietly. Keith nodded. Step 2 is staff stability. Everyone gets through the hour without being mistreated. Yes. Step 3, I said, is truth. If they force it into the open, we do not argue. We confirm, we document, we proceed. Keith exhaled slowly, like the clarity helped. Then my phone buzzed once in my hand. A text from Caleb. Mom, Sloane's dad is about to call you out. He's asking where you are. Do you want me to stop it? I looked at the message for a moment, then I typed back with one hand. No, I'm coming in. Stay calm. Let him speak. I put the phone face down in my palm and looked at the closed suite door. Then I nodded to Keith. Now, I said. When I stepped back into the suite, the noise didn't stop, but it shifted. A few people noticed me at the same time, like a small current moving through water. Heads turned, eyes assessed. Then they returned to their conversations, deciding I wasn't important. Grant Holloway decided differently. He was near the terrace doors, a tumbler in his hand, holding a small audience the way some men hold a microphone. His laugh was loud enough to claim space. When he saw me, he lifted his chin, like he'd been waiting. Well, he said, voice carrying. There she is. The group around him quieted, not fully, just enough. Caleb's mother, Grant continued, smiling like he was being generous, hiding out in the back. Come on, don't be shy. Sloane's face tightened in a way that was almost invisible if you weren't watching for it. Marin's smile stayed in place but lost warmth. Caleb's posture went still for half a second. He glanced toward me, checking. I walked forward at an even pace. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I'm not shy, Mr. Holloway, I said. I was letting your guests settle. Grant's eyebrows lifted. Guests? He repeated, amused. Listen to that. You're comfortable with all this? He gestured around the suite, the skyline, the trays, the flowers, the light. It's a lot, he added, as if he were describing a museum to someone who had never seen art. I let the question hang in the air for a moment. I could feel people leaning in without moving, the way they do when they sense a social test. It's comfortable, I said simply. Grant chuckled. Comfortable. Sure. He took a sip from his glass. Then he tilted his head, like he was about to offer advice. You know, he said, Sloane and Marin have been trying to make tonight easy for you. They even set up a private spot for you. More your speed. A few people laughed politely, the kind of laugh that says, we are on your side because you seem powerful. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. I looked at Grant and kept my voice level. I heard, I said. It was considerate. Marin stepped forward a little, eyes sharp now. We just thought it might feel more natural, she said. Not everyone enjoys being in the center of things. Some people prefer service corridors, Sloane added softly, and then smiled like she'd said something harmless. The room went quieter. Not silent, just thinner. Like someone had turned down the background music. I could have corrected her in front of everyone. I could have told them who I was and watched the faces change. Instead, I asked a question that did not sound like a challenge. How is your event deposit doing? I said. Grant blinked. What? Marin's smile stayed on, but her eyes moved. Quick, toward Caleb, toward Sloane, back to me. It's fine, Marin said. Of course it's fine. I nodded once, as if I accepted that. Then I added gently, Keith mentioned it was flagged. Keith was standing near the corridor with a neutral expression, exactly where I wanted him. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply existed as a quiet confirmation that this wasn't gossip. Grant's face flushed a little. Who is Keith? The general manager, I said. Grant laughed again, but it was thinner. Why would the general manager be talking to you about deposits? I let a small pause pass. Not for drama, for control, for timing, for the simple fact that I don't rush when other people try to set the pace. Because it's his job to keep the property in compliance, I said. And it's my job to make sure he does. Grant stared at me. Marin's voice sharpened. Excuse me? I turned slightly so I could see them both without moving my feet. I also saw the vendor file, I added, still calm. The florist invoice, the change orders. Sloane's throat worked. She swallowed and then lifted her chin. Why are you looking at vendor invoices? Caleb shifted, like he wanted to step in. I did not look at him. I didn't need to. I could feel him holding himself in place. I answered Sloane the way I answer in meetings when someone asks a question they already know the answer to, but don't want to admit it. Because the resort is under new ownership, I said, and we audit events that carry our name. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes narrowed. This resort is owned by Redwood Crest, he said, slower now. And Redwood Crest is held by a group out of Sacramento. IR something. I nodded, polite. It is, I said. Marquez Capital is the controlling entity. The letters on the paperwork are different than the name you've been using. Marin's face changed first. Not shock, exactly. More like the quick math of a woman realizing she might have been speaking to the wrong person for months. Sloane's eyes went wide, then darted to Caleb. Grant's voice rose slightly. That's not possible. I didn't argue. I reached into my folder and pulled out one page. Just one. Clean. Signed. Time-stamped. I held it at my side for a moment, not waving it, not showing it off. Then I handed it to Keith. Please confirm for them, I said quietly. Keith took the page, stepped forward, and spoke in the calm, professional tone of someone reading a fact, not taking a side. This is the executed transfer summary, he said. Ms. Lena Marquez is the principal and signing authority for the ownership group. She also approved the new conduct policy and the financial controls currently in place. He paused, then added, she is, in practical terms, the owner. The room went very still. Someone near the bar cleared their throat. A phone screen lifted slightly, then lowered again, like the person thought better of it. Sloane's mouth parted. She didn't speak. Marin's hand tightened around her clutch. Grant stared at Keith, then at me, as if he were trying to find a loophole through sheer will. I kept my voice steady. I don't want a scene, I said. Not for my son, not for your guests. Then I looked directly at Marin and Grant. We can discuss your account status and your staff interactions in a private room, I continued. Or we can do it here. Those are the options. Grant's face reddened. You can't talk to us like we're tenants. I didn't flinch. I can talk to you like adults, I said. In a private room, with documentation. Sloane finally spoke, voice small. Caleb. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. I gave him a calm nod that said, I have it. Then I turned and walked toward the private dining room door, not fast, not slow, trusting that people follow clarity more than they follow volume. Behind me, I heard chairs shift, a glass set down too hard, Marin's heels clicking in a quick, tight rhythm. Keith opened the door for us. Inside, the room was quiet and softly lit, like a place meant for conversation that stays contained. I stepped in and set my folder on the table. Then I looked at the empty chair across from me and said, Sit. And I waited for them to decide what kind of people they were going to be next. The chair across from me stayed empty for a moment. Grant stood with his arms crossed like posture could turn back time. Marin held her clutch in both hands, knuckles pale. Sloane hovered near the doorway, half in and half out, like she wanted an escape route but didn't want to be seen taking it. Keith closed the door quietly behind us and took a position near the wall. Not threatening, just present. I didn't sit right away. I opened my folder and laid 3 items on the table in a neat line. First, the executed ownership summary with signatures and dates. Second, the event account page Keith had printed, with the declined deposit attempt and the fraud hold. Third, the incident report from Marta, with the timestamp and location. I waited until everyone's eyes followed the line of paper. Then I sat. Before anyone talks, I said calmly, I'm going to confirm a few facts. After that, you can ask questions." Grant scoffed under his breath, but he didn't interrupt. I pointed to the first document. "This property changed controlling ownership on June 18th, I said. "The transfer closed at 4:12 p.m. Pacific. The operating entity stayed the same name for licensing continuity. The control did not." Marin's lips parted as if she was going to argue. Then she didn't. I pointed to the second page. "Your event deposit was attempted twice," I continued. "Once last month, once tonight. Both attempts were declined. The second attempt triggered a fraud prevention hold. That means the system will not accept add-on charges until funds clear." Grant leaned forward. "That's an error. We have money." I nodded once. "If you do, the bank will prove it quickly. Until then, we follow the system." Sloane's voice came out tight. "We paid." "You attempted to pay," I said, keeping it factual. "Attempting is not the same as clearing." Marin's eyes flicked to Grant, a small, quick movement that told me she knew more than she wanted her daughter to know. I didn't comment on that. I simply moved to the third page. "This is the vendor incident report," I said. "Marta is not an employee. She is a contracted vendor. She reported being spoken to in a way that violates our conduct policy. It has a timestamp. It has witnesses." Sloane flushed. "That's ridiculous." I was stressed. "I believe you were stressed," I said. "That is not the point." Grant's jaw clenched. "So what is this? You drag us in here to lecture us?" "No," I said. "I brought you in here to resolve it without humiliating anyone." Marin's laugh came out brittle. "That ship sailed the second you marched in with your little papers." I looked at her for a beat, calm. "The difference is," I said, "I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult you. I didn't call for attention. I asked for privacy." She stared at me, eyes sharp, like she wanted to find emotion and couldn't. I reached for my phone. "Keith," I said, "call finance. Put it on speaker." Keith moved immediately. One tap, then another. A ring. Then a voice answered, professional and tired. "This is Dana in finance." "Dana," Keith said. "Ms. Marquez is here. We need confirmation on the Holloway event deposit and the fraud hold." There was a pause, then a shift in tone. "Yes," Dana said. "I have it. The deposit attempt at 7:46 p.m. was declined. The fallback method triggered a fraud prevention hold at 7:49. No cleared funds have posted. We cannot release add-ons until we have confirmed funds." Grant's face changed. Not outrage, not yet. More like the moment a bluff meets a wall. Marin's eyes closed briefly. Sloane looked between them, confused. "Mom? Dad?" Grant snapped. "This is not your concern." That was the first time I saw Sloane's composure crack in a real way. She wasn't upset about me. She was upset because her parents had lied to her or hidden something, and she had built her confidence on their certainty. I kept my voice even. "Dana," I said into the speaker. "Thank you. Stay available for 10 minutes. I may need one more confirmation." "Of course, Ms. Marquez," Dana replied, and the line stayed open. I turned to Grant. "Here is what will happen next," I said. "Not as a threat, as procedure." I lifted one finger. 1. The event continues. Guests are not punished for your account issues. Second finger. 2. No additional charges are approved tonight until you provide a cleared payment. If you want the upgraded bar, the extended staffing, the extra floral, we can do it. But you pay first. Third finger. 3. Every vendor is paid on time. Marta is paid tonight. Any unpaid invoices attached to your family account will be reviewed by morning. If you want to dispute charges, you do it through accounting, not through intimidation. Grant's voice went lower. "And what about our reputation?" I met his eyes. "Your reputation is not mine to manage," I said. "Your behavior is." Marin's posture softened just a fraction, then tightened again. "What do you want us to do?" she asked. "Stand out there and confess we're broke?" I didn't react to the word. I want you to stop using staff as a pressure valve, I said. I want you to stop treating vendors like they're disposable, and I want you to stop trying to place my family where you think we belong. Sloane took a step toward the table. Her voice was smaller now. I didn't know, she said. I swear I didn't know. I looked at her, not with anger, just with attention. Didn't know what? I asked. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked to her parents again, then back to me. That you owned it, she said. Caleb, who had been quiet in the corner until now, spoke for the first time. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That's the problem, Sloane, he said. You only see respect as something that comes with a title. Sloane's eyes filled. She blinked hard. No, she whispered. That's not true. Caleb didn't argue. He just looked tired in a way that made me ache a little. I kept my tone steady. This is not a courtroom, I said. We are not here to punish you. We are here to decide what happens next. Grant leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. So decide. I nodded. 2 paths, I said. You choose. I slid a single sheet forward. It was a standard conduct and privileges notice, the kind we use across properties. Clean language, no drama. Path 1, I said. Your family privileges at all properties under my group are suspended effective tonight. Club access, marina slips, preferred booking, event priority, all of it. Not because you're embarrassed, because your account is flagged and your behavior towards staff is documented. Marin's breath caught. Grant's face hardened. You can't do that. I can, I said. It is written into the terms you signed when you were granted those privileges. I tapped the bottom line where the policy reference sat. Then I pulled back the paper slightly. Path 2, I continued. We treat this as a probation period. 1 year, clear payment history, clean conduct, no incidents. Any staff complaint is logged and reviewed. If you violate policy, privileges end without discussion. Sloane swallowed. And what do I have to do? I looked at her. Tonight, I said, you apologize to Marta, directly, not a performance, a real apology. Her face flushed. Of course. And tomorrow, I added, you will work 1 full month at this property. Marin's head snapped up. Absolutely not. Sloane flinched at her mother's tone. I didn't look at Marin. I stayed with Sloane. 1 month, I repeated. Not as a photo opportunity, not shadowing, real work, early mornings, late nights, guest requests, inventory, a uniform, a schedule. You will learn what it takes to make a place like this run. Sloane stared at me, blinking fast. Caleb's voice was quiet. Mom, I glanced at him. He wasn't asking me to stop. He was checking that this wasn't about pride. It wasn't. I nodded once to reassure him. Sloane spoke again, voice unsteady but clear. If I do that, she said, does that fix us? Caleb didn't answer immediately. That silence was his, not mine. I kept my focus on process. It doesn't fix anything, I said. It shows me whether you can change. That's all. Grant let out a harsh breath. This is insane. It is simple, I said. Simple does not always feel easy. Marin's voice softened in a way that sounded strategic. We can donate. We can write checks. We can set up a foundation. We can make this right without humiliating our daughter. I looked at her calmly. A check is not character, I said. It can support good work. It cannot replace it. Sloane's shoulders rose and fell once, a measured breath. Then she surprised her parents. I'll do it, she said. Marin's eyes widened. Sloane? I'll do it, she repeated steadier. Because I was wrong. Grant leaned forward. You're not scrubbing floors for anyone. Sloane turned to him, and her voice didn't rise, but it hardened. I'm not doing it for them, she said. I'm doing it because I don't like who I was tonight. The room went quiet again, not charged, just real. I looked at Keith. Document that agreement, I said. Tomorrow morning, 5:30 a.m. start, and assign her to a department that will actually work her. No special treatment. Keith nodded. Yes, ma'am. Marin's hands shook slightly around her clutch. And us? I turned back to her and Grant. Tonight you will apologize to staff you have mistreated, I said, and you will provide cleared funds by morning. If you cannot, the event add-ons are canceled and the account is frozen. Your privileges go on suspension until finance clears you. Grant opened his mouth. I raised my hand slightly, not to stop him, just to slow the room. This isn't personal, I said. It's policy. I glanced at the speakerphone. Dana, I said, please send Keith the cleared funds requirements and the payment options. Make it simple. Make it documented. Yes, Ms. Marquez, Dana replied. I looked at Caleb, then back at Sloane. The engagement, I said quietly, is between the two of you. I will not decide it for you. Caleb finally spoke. His voice was calm, but firm. We're postponing the wedding planning, he said, looking at Sloane. Not as punishment, as reality. I need to know you can respect people when no one is watching. Sloane's eyes filled again. She nodded once, a small motion that meant she accepted it. I understand, she said. Grant pushed his chair back. This is unbelievable. Keith stepped forward slightly, not aggressive, just ready. I kept my voice even. Grant, I said, using his first name for the first time. You can be angry, you can be embarrassed, but you will not take it out on staff tonight. If you need air, take it. If you need to leave, leave. If you raise your voice at an employee, you will be escorted out. Marin stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as someone to categorize, but as someone who could end things cleanly. Sloane looked down at the table, then up at me. Where is Marta? She asked quietly. In the service corridor, I said. Claire can take you. Sloane nodded. I'll do it now, she said. She reached for the door handle, then paused and looked at Caleb. He didn't move toward her. He didn't comfort her. He simply nodded once, like he was letting her take her first honest step without rescuing her from it. Sloane opened the door and walked out with Keith following at a respectful distance to coordinate. Marin stood slowly. Her voice was lower now. Lena, she said, trying the name carefully. You didn't have to do it like this. I gathered my papers back into the folder with unhurried hands. I did it privately, I said. You're the ones who tried to place me publicly. Grant muttered something under his breath and moved toward the door. Marin followed him, still shaken. Caleb stayed. When we were alone for a moment, he exhaled and sat in the chair across from me. I didn't want it to come to this, he said quietly. I know, I replied. He looked at the folder, then at my face. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded. I'm fine. He gave a small, tired smile. You always say that. I mean it, I said, and then I softened my voice just a little. But I'm also not ignoring what happened. He nodded, eyes steady. I'm going to go back out, he said. Keep the room calm. I reached across the table and straightened his tie again, a small familiar motion that grounded both of us. Go, I said, and don't explain. Let actions speak. He stood and left. I stayed in the private dining room, alone again, and listened to the muted sounds of the party through the wall. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Keith. Sloane asked to change into a uniform before she apologizes. She said she doesn't want it to look like a performance. Claire is with her. I read it once. Then I set the phone down on the table and waited. The party softened after that. Not because anyone made an announcement, and not because the room suddenly became polite, but because people can sense when a line has been drawn. Voices lowered. Laughter became careful. The planner stopped running and started breathing again. I stayed in the private dining room for a few minutes longer than I needed to. I let the quiet do its job. Keith checked in once, just a short update. Marta is paid, he said. She confirmed receipt. Also, Sloane apologized. Privately, no phones. Claire was there. Good, I replied. And Grant signed a same-night payment authorization, Keith added. Funds still need to clear, but finance has the paperwork. Document everything, I said. Keith nodded, then hesitated. Ms. Marquez, do you want staff to know who you are? I thought about that. Not tonight, I said. Tonight they need stability, not a new story to manage. But make sure they know the conduct policy is real, and make sure they know it applies to everyone. Keith's shoulders lowered again, like he was storing that sentence for later. When I walked back into the suite, Caleb was near the terrace doors, speaking quietly with a few guests. He saw me, and his eyes softened, just a little. He didn't come over. He didn't need to. He was doing what I asked, keeping the room calm. Sloane moved through the space differently now. She was in simple flats and a plain black wrap, hair pulled back, face freshly washed. Not dramatic, just stripped of performance. She wasn't smiling much, but she was steady. She carried a tray for a few minutes, then disappeared toward the service corridor again. Marin stayed near the edges. She spoke to staff with a tight voice and careful words, like she was learning a new language and worried she might mispronounce it. Grant avoided me completely. That was fine. I wasn't there to be chased. Claire passed by once and paused beside me. Thank you, she said, very softly. For what? I asked. She looked down for a moment, then back up. For making it feel like we mattered. I nodded and kept it simple. You do. Near the end of the night, Caleb found me by the corridor. You ready to go? He asked. I am, I said. We walked out together through the quieter hallway, past the same service door, past the carts now lined up neatly, past the scent of citrus cleaner replacing the earlier mix of food and stress. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The valley lights were scattered in the distance like someone had dropped a handful of coins. In the car, Caleb loosened his tie and leaned his head back for a second. I didn't enjoy watching that, he said. I know, I replied. He turned to look at me, but I'm glad you didn't rescue her from it. I stared out through the windshield for a moment, letting the silence sit between us in a calm way. People can change, I said, but they only change if they meet reality without someone patting the corners. Caleb nodded once. And if she can't? Then she can't, I said. And you will still be okay. That was the part I wanted him to hear most. When I got home, I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't scroll. I didn't rehash the night in my head like a replay. I made tea, chamomile, the kind that tastes like warm water and patience. I set my folder on the kitchen table and opened it one last time. I checked that Keith had emailed the documentation to legal ops, that finance had the payment requirements in writing, and that the incident report was filed correctly. No missing steps, no loose ends. Then I closed the folder and slid it into a drawer. I washed one mug, I wiped the counter. Small motions that bring you back to yourself. Before bed, I checked one message from Keith. Staff briefing scheduled for 9 a.m. Conduct policy and reporting process. Also, Claire asked if we can share the scholarship idea with HR when it is appropriate. I wrote back one line. Yes. Do it properly. Then I put the phone face down and let the room go quiet. As I turned off the light, I thought about something Claire had said earlier, about rumors when ownership changes. People always wonder what the new owners will be like, if they will be fair, if they will be cruel, if they will even notice the people who keep the place running. I noticed. And I also knew this would not be the last time someone tried to measure my worth by what they assumed about me. There was already another situation waiting, not at this resort, but at a different property with a different kind of family, and a manager who had asked for a private meeting next week. Just the words, membership review, in his email had been enough to tell me what kind of conversation it would be. For now, I let it wait. If you stayed with me through this, thank you. If you'd like to support stories like this, please tap like and subscribe. It helps more than people realize. And if you feel comfortable, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. 2 popular stories will appear next, and I'll see you there.